At my daughter's wedding, her fiancé replaced my seat with a trash can labeled, "The old man nobody likes." I didn't react. I simply adjusted my suit, smiled, and walked out. When I canceled the band and all the payments, "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I'm Charles, and at 61 years old, I thought I'd seen every possible way a person could be disappointed by family. I was wrong. The morning of Scarlett's wedding started like any other Saturday. I woke up early, pressed my best navy suit, and polished my shoes until they gleamed. I'd been looking forward to this day for months, not because I particularly liked her fiancé Derek, but because seeing my daughter happy meant everything to me. After raising her alone since she was 8, when my wife Sarah passed from cancer, Scarlett had been my entire world. I arrived at the Grandview Country Club 30 minutes early. The venue was stunning. Derek had insisted on having the ceremony at the most expensive location in town. White roses cascaded from every surface, crystal chandeliers caught the afternoon light, and a string quartet played softly in the background. Everything was perfect, exactly as Scarlett had dreamed. The wedding planner, a sharp-dressed woman with a clipboard, greeted me at the entrance. "You must be the father of the bride," she said with a professional smile. "Let me show you to your seat." I followed her through the elegantly decorated space, past rows of white chairs adorned with silk ribbons. Family members and friends were already taking their places, chatting quietly and admiring the setup. I nodded to a few familiar faces. Scarlett's college friends, some distant relatives, Derek's pompous family members who always looked at me like I didn't belong in their circle. "Here we are," the planner said, stopping abruptly. I looked around, confused. We weren't at the front row where the father of the bride traditionally sits. We weren't even near the altar. Instead, she was pointing to a corner near the back wall, next to the restrooms, where a large silver trash can sat with a handwritten tag attached to it. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake," I said, my voice steady despite the confusion building in my chest. The planner checked her clipboard again, then looked at the tag more closely. Her face flushed red as she read it aloud. "The old man nobody likes." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my chest tighten, my breath catch in my throat. Around us, a few guests had noticed the commotion and were starting to stare. The planner looked mortified, clearly realizing this wasn't some terrible mistake, but a deliberate act of cruelty. "Sir, I don't understand. This can't be right," she stammered. But I did understand. I understood perfectly. This was Derek's doing, with Scarlett's permission. My own daughter had allowed her fiancé to humiliate me at her wedding, in front of everyone we knew. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at that trash can with my name on it. The string quartet continued playing their gentle melody, completely oblivious to the fact that my heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces right there in the corner of their perfect venue. My mind raced back to the past year, to all the subtle signs I'd ignored. The way Derek would smirk when I tried to contribute to wedding conversations. How Scarlett would quickly change the subject whenever I offered suggestions. The times they'd make plans right in front of me without including me, as if I were invisible. I remembered the night Scarlett called to tell me about the engagement. I'd been so happy, so proud. "Dad, Derek proposed," she'd squealed into the phone. "We're thinking about a spring wedding, something elegant, you know." I'd immediately started planning how I could help. "Whatever you need, sweetheart. I've been saving up for this day since you were little." But as the months went on, I realized my input wasn't wanted. When I suggested the photographer who'd done beautiful work at my neighbor's daughter's wedding, Derek dismissed him as not high-end enough. When I offered to pay for the flowers, Scarlett said they'd already handled it. Every attempt I made to be involved was politely but firmly rebuffed. I thought they were just being independent, trying to handle things as a couple. I never imagined they saw me as a burden, an embarrassment to be hidden away. The planner was still standing there, wringing her hands. "Sir, I can get you a proper chair. This is completely unacceptable." I looked at her kind face, then at the trash can, then at the growing number of guests who were now openly staring and whispering. Some of Derek's family members were actually smiling, as if this were some amusing joke they were all in on. "It's all right," I said quietly, adjusting my tie with hands that I was proud weren't shaking. "I understand perfectly now." I'd spent the last year pouring money into this wedding without Scarlett even knowing it. The venue, the catering, the band, the flowers. I'd been the anonymous benefactor behind it all, working through Derek's family to keep it a surprise. I wanted my daughter to have the perfect day, even if it meant liquidating my retirement savings. But standing there, looking at that trash can with its cruel tag, I realized something profound. I wasn't the father of the bride. I was the fool who'd been paying for his own humiliation. I straightened my shoulders, looked the planner in the eye, and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was genuine. "Thank you for your concern, but I won't be staying after all." As I walked toward the exit, I could hear the whispers growing louder behind me. I didn't care. For the first time in months, maybe years, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The afternoon sun hit my face as I stepped outside, and I took the deepest breath I'd taken in a long time. Scarlett had made her choice. Derek had made his. Now it was time for me to make mine. I sat in my car in the country club parking lot for exactly 3 minutes, watching well-dressed guests hurry toward the entrance. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white, but my mind was crystal clear for the first time in months. Scarlett had no idea I was funding her perfect wedding. She thought Derek's family was covering everything, that her fiancé was some successful businessman who could afford a $40,000 reception without blinking. The truth was much different and much more painful. 6 months ago, Derek had approached me privately. "Charles," he'd said, using that condescending tone he always took with me, "I need to be honest about something. The wedding Scarlett wants is beyond my current means, but I don't want to disappoint her." I'd been so relieved that he was finally including me, finally asking for my help. "What do you need?" I'd asked immediately. "If you could cover some of the major expenses, I'd be grateful, just until my new business venture takes off. Scarlett doesn't need to know. We both know how proud she is." Looking back now, I could see the manipulation clearly, but at the time, I thought I was helping my daughter achieve her dreams. I liquidated my retirement account, took out a second mortgage on my house, and even sold my late wife's jewelry. The pieces I'd planned to give Scarlett on her wedding day. Now, pulling out my phone, I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Marcus, the wedding coordinator Derek's family had recommended, answered on the second ring. "Charles, how's the father of the bride feeling today?" "Marcus, I need to cancel everything. The band, the catering, the flowers, the photography, all of it." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, what?" "The wedding is happening right now. Guests are already arriving. I know exactly when it's happening, and I'm the one who's been paying for it. Check your contracts. Every payment has come from Charles Whitmore's account. I'm invoking the cancellation clause. But sir, this is impossible. The vendors are already set up. The food is prepared. The band is about to start." I took a deep breath, surprising myself with how calm I felt. "Marcus, I've read every contract thoroughly. Each one has a clause that allows me to cancel with immediate effect if I'm not satisfied with the service." "Well, I'm not satisfied. In fact, I'm extremely dissatisfied with how I've been treated today. Sir, please, let's talk about this. Whatever the problem is, we can fix it." "The problem can't be fixed, Marcus. My daughter and her fiancé have made it very clear that I'm not welcome at this celebration, so I'm taking my money and leaving." "You have 15 minutes to start packing up before I call the credit card company and dispute every charge." I could hear papers shuffling frantically on the other end. "Charles, please. The deposit alone is $15,000. If we cancel now, everyone loses money. The vendors, the venue, everyone. That's not my problem anymore." After hanging up with Marcus, I made 3 more calls. First to Melody's Catering. "This is Charles Whitmore. Cancel the dinner service for the Scarlett Whitmore wedding immediately." "Yes, I know it's starting in an hour. Yes, I'm serious." Then to Harmony Strings, the quartet I'd hired specifically because Scarlett had always loved classical music. "This is regarding the Whitmore wedding today. I need you to pack up and leave. No, you'll still be paid for your time, but your services are no longer needed." Finally, to Petals and Pearls, the florist who'd spent 2 days creating Scarlett's dream arrangements. "Remove everything. The bouquets, the centerpieces, the altar arrangements. All of it." Each call was met with confusion, then panic, then desperate attempts to talk me out of my decision. But I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. By the time I finished the last call, I could see Marcus running toward the country club entrance, his phone pressed to his ear, probably trying to reach Derek or Scarlett. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I started my car and began driving away, but pulled over after 2 blocks. I needed to make one more call, the most important one. Thompson and Associates, this is Janet. Janet, this is Charles Whitmore. I need to speak with Robert immediately about updating my will. Of course, Mr. Whitmore. Is this urgent? Very urgent. I need to remove my daughter as a beneficiary and establish a new plan for my estate. Can Robert see me this afternoon? He has an opening at 4 o'clock. Will that work? I glanced at my watch. 2:30. Perfect timing. I'll be there. As I drove toward the lawyer's office, my phone started ringing. First Derek, then Scarlett, then numbers I didn't recognize. Probably frantic vendors trying to figure out what was happening. I let them all go to voicemail. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in months, I didn't look tired. I didn't look defeated. I looked like a man who'd finally remembered his own worth. The light turned green, and I drove toward my new life, leaving the chaos behind me. They'd asked for the old man. Nobody likes to disappear from their perfect day. Well, I was granting their wish in ways they never could have imagined. Scarlett was about to learn that actions have consequences, and that the father she'd taken for granted had been the only thing standing between her and financial reality. In about an hour, when the vendors started packing up and the music stopped playing, she'd finally understand what she'd lost. But by then, it would be far too late. I was sitting in Robert Thompson's law office signing the papers that would remove Scarlett from my will, when my phone buzzed with the first panicked text message. I glanced at it briefly. It was from Derek, then turned the phone face down and continued signing. "Are you sure about this, Charles?" Robert asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Family disputes can often be resolved with time and conversation. I looked up from the documents, thinking about that trash can with its cruel tag. "Robert, some things can't be forgiven. Some lines once crossed change everything permanently." He nodded solemnly and witnessed my signature. "The changes will be effective immediately. Your estate will now go to the American Cancer Society, as you've requested." It felt fitting. Sarah would have approved. She'd always believed in helping others, and she'd died fighting the disease that would now benefit from the money Scarlett thought she'd inherit. My phone buzzed again. Then again. I ignored it. Meanwhile, back at the Grandview Country Club, chaos was unfolding exactly as I'd anticipated. Later, I'd pieced together what happened from the dozens of voicemails and the gossip that inevitably followed such a spectacular disaster. Scarlett had been in the bridal suite, putting the finishing touches on her makeup, when Marcus burst in without knocking. She was surrounded by her bridesmaids, all of them giggling and taking selfies, completely unaware that their perfect day was about to implode. "Miss Whitmore, we have a serious problem," Marcus had said, his face pale and sweaty. "What kind of problem?" Scarlett had asked, barely looking up from her lipstick application. "Your father just canceled everything. The catering, the band, the flowers, everything." According to her maid of honor, Jessica, who called me later that week, Scarlett had laughed. Actually laughed. "That's impossible. My dad doesn't control any of this. Derek's family is paying for everything. Ma'am, I'm looking at the contracts right now. Every single payment has come from Charles Whitmore's account. He's been funding this entire wedding." That's when the laughter stopped. Derek, who'd been getting ready in the groom's suite, came running when he heard Scarlett screaming. Not crying, screaming. The kind of rage-filled screaming that happens when someone realizes they've made a catastrophic mistake. "What do you mean my father's been paying for this?" she'd demanded. "You told me your family was covering everything." Derek apparently went completely white. I can explain. It was supposed to be temporary. Just until my business deal came through." "What business deal? Derek, what business deal?" While this confrontation was happening upstairs, the vendors were efficiently dismantling the reception. The string quartet packed up their instruments mid-song. The catering staff wheeled out the dinner that would never be served. The florist methodically removed every arrangement, leaving behind bare tables and empty altar space. Guests who'd been seated and waiting for the ceremony to begin watched in stunned confusion as their elegant venue transformed into an empty shell. Derek's Aunt Patricia, a woman who'd never liked me and made no effort to hide it, kept asking anyone who'd listen, "What's happening? Where's Charles? Someone needs to find Charles." But I was 40 miles away. establishing a new bank account and transferring what remained of my savings to an institution where Derek would never find it. The maid of honor later told me that Scarlett had run downstairs in her wedding dress, train dragging behind her, trying to stop the vendors from leaving. "You can't do this," she'd shouted at the catering manager. "This is my wedding day." "Ma'am, we're very sorry, but our contract was with Mr. Whitmore, and he's terminated our services. We have no choice." That's when Derek showed his true colors. Instead of trying to fix the situation, instead of taking responsibility for the lies he'd told, he turned on Scarlett in front of everyone. "This is your fault," he'd yelled. "You should have managed your father better. I told you he was going to be a problem." "Managed my father? What are you talking about? You should have kept him happy, kept him under control. Now look what he's done. He's destroyed everything." Jessica told me that several guests gasped audibly. Derek's own mother looked horrified, but Derek wasn't finished. "Do you have any idea how much money this cost me? The deposits I put down, the planning, and your crazy father just destroyed it all because what? Someone played a little joke on him?" "A little joke?" Scarlett's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "Oh, come on. The trash can thing was funny. The old man needs to learn to take a joke." That's when Scarlett apparently realized who she'd been about to marry. Not because he'd lied about the money, not because he'd manipulated the situation, but because he'd shown such casual cruelty toward the one person who'd sacrificed everything for her happiness. "Get out," she'd whispered. "What? Get out. Get away from me. This wedding is over." Derek had looked around at the gathered guests, at his own family, at the bridesmaids who were staring at him in shock. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away our entire relationship over this? Our relationship was built on lies. You've been lying to me for months, and you humiliated my father, the man who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me, and you thought it was funny to treat him like garbage. Scarlett, be reasonable. We can fix this. We can call him, apologize, get him to pay for everything again." The silence that followed was so complete that Jessica said you could hear the air conditioning humming in the walls. "Pay for everything again?" Scarlett's voice was barely audible. "You mean you never intended to pay him back?" Derek's face said everything. The business deal, the temporary arrangement, the promise to reimburse me, all lies. He'd planned to let me fund their entire wedding and then disappear into married life, leaving me with the bills and the debt. By 7 that evening, the Grandview Country Club was empty, except for the cleaning crew. 300 guests had gone home hungry and confused. Scarlett had locked herself in the bridal suite, still in her wedding dress, crying for the first time in years, and Derek had driven away in his leased BMW, muttering about crazy families and ungrateful women. My phone had 37 missed calls and 62 text messages, but I didn't read a single one. I was having dinner at a quiet restaurant across town, enjoying the best steak I'd had in years, finally understanding what it felt like to put myself first. The wedding that was supposed to be Scarlett's perfect day had become the day she learned that choices have consequences, and that the father she'd taken for granted was the only person who'd ever truly loved her unconditionally. 3 weeks after the wedding that never happened, I was loading the last box into my moving truck when Mrs. Henderson from next door came over with a concerned expression. "Charles, dear, that girl has been by here every day since Tuesday, the one who looks just like you around the eyes. She seems quite distressed." I paused, a box of kitchen supplies balanced in my arms. "If she comes by again, just tell her I've moved. Don't tell her where." Mrs. Henderson frowned. "But Charles, she's your daughter, isn't she? Surely whatever happened can be worked out." I set the box down gently. Mrs. Henderson was 78 and had watched Scarlett grow up. She'd seen me walking the floors at night when Scarlett had nightmares after Sarah died. She'd brought us casseroles when I was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She meant well. Some things can't be worked out, Helen. Some damage is permanent. After the wedding disaster, I'd made a series of quick, decisive changes. I'd sold the house, the one I'd been paying 2 mortgages on to fund Scarlett's dream wedding. I'd found a small apartment in Cedar Falls, about 2 hours away, in a town where nobody knew my history. I'd even taken early retirement from the engineering firm where I'd worked for 15 years. It wasn't just about avoiding Scarlett, though that was part of it. I needed to start over completely, to build a life where I mattered, where I wasn't just someone's ATM or emotional support system. The moving truck pulled away from the curb, and I followed in my car, not looking back at the house where I'd raised my daughter alone for 13 years. In the rearview mirror, I could see Mrs. Henderson standing on her porch, waving sadly. My new apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian house. It had hardwood floors, big windows, and a kitchen just large enough for one person. After living in a 4-bedroom house for decades, the space felt liberating rather than cramped. I'd been there exactly 5 days when my new landlord, Tom, knocked on my door. "Charles, there's a young woman downstairs asking about you. Says she's your daughter. Should I send her up?" Through the window, I could see Scarlett's car parked on the street. She'd found me already. I shouldn't have been surprised. She'd always been resourceful when she wanted something badly enough. "Tell her I'm not available," I said calmly. Tom looked uncomfortable. "She seems pretty upset. Been crying from the looks of it. I'm sure she is upset, but that doesn't change anything." After Tom left, I watched from my window as he delivered the message. Scarlett stood on the sidewalk for a long time, staring up at my building. She looked smaller somehow, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of the designer clothes Derek used to buy her. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and even from 3 floors up I could see she'd been crying. She called my name a few times, but I didn't respond. Eventually, she got back in her car and drove away. But she came back the next day, and the day after that. On the 4th day, she brought Jessica with her. I watched them from my window, saw Jessica pointing at my building and obviously trying to convince Scarlett to give up. But Scarlett shook her head stubbornly and sat down on the front steps. She stayed there for 6 hours. I went about my day as normal. I'd started volunteering at the local animal shelter, walking dogs and helping with adoptions. I'd joined a woodworking class at the community center. I was building a life that had nothing to do with being someone's father, someone's financial provider, someone's emotional crutch. When I came home that evening, Scarlett was gone, but there was an envelope taped to the front door of the building. Tom handed it to me with a sympathetic look. "She asked me to make sure you got this," he said. I took the envelope but didn't open it until I was safely in my apartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Scarlett's familiar handwriting. "Dad, I know you're angry. I know I hurt you. I know I let Derek treat you terribly, and I know I was part of it. I've been trying to understand how I became someone who could do that to the person who loved me most. I don't have any excuses. I just need you to know that I'm sorry, and I need you to know that Derek is gone." I ended the engagement the night of the wedding. I know you'll probably say it's too little too late, but I had to tell you. At the bottom, she'd written her new phone number and address. She was living in a studio apartment across town from our old house. The return address was in a neighborhood I knew well. Not a great area, but not terrible either. The kind of place young people lived when they were just starting out and couldn't afford much. I read the letter 3 times, then put it in the kitchen drawer with the takeout menus and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Henderson called me. "Charles, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from the forwarding information you left with the post office." "What's wrong, Helen?" "It's about your daughter. She's been coming by the old house every few days, just sitting in her car outside. Yesterday she knocked on my door and asked if I knew how to reach you." I sighed. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I didn't have your information, which is technically true." "But Charles, she looked so thin and sad. I know it's not my business, but that girl is struggling." After I hung up, I found myself thinking about Scarlett more than I wanted to. Not with the old protective instincts, those had died that day at the country club, but with a kind of detached curiosity. What was she learning about herself? About the consequences of her choices? 3 days later, I got a call from Derek. "Charles, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "No, we don't. Look, I know you're angry about the wedding thing, but Scarlett is being completely unreasonable. She won't even take my calls. You need to talk to her, make her see sense." I almost laughed. "Derek, you do realize I haven't spoken to Scarlett since before the wedding, right?" "What? But she said she's been trying to reach you." "She has been. I haven't been responding." There was a long pause. "So you're just abandoning her? Your own daughter?" "Derek, let me explain something to you. Scarlett made her choice when she let you treat me like garbage at her wedding. You made your choice when you decided to lie and manipulate both of us. Now you're both living with the consequences of those choices. But she needs you. She's got no money, no support system. She's living in some crappy apartment and working at a coffee shop. Then maybe she'll learn what it's like to work for what she has instead of expecting other people to provide it. You can't be serious. She's your daughter. Yes, she is. And for 30 years, I put her needs before my own, sacrificed my happiness for hers, and enabled her to become someone who thought it was acceptable to humiliate me publicly. I'm done with that version of fatherhood. Derek hung up on me, but I didn't care. I was finally free from both of them, finally living a life where my value wasn't measured by what I could provide for other people. That night, I cooked myself a nice dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and sat on my small balcony watching the sunset. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely content. Scarlett could search for me all she wanted. The father she was looking for, the one who would drop everything to rescue her from the consequences of her own actions, no longer existed. 6 months into my new life in Cedar Falls, I'd established a routine that brought me genuine peace. Tuesday and Thursday mornings at the animal shelter, Wednesday evenings in my woodworking class, and weekends exploring the hiking trails that wound through the state park just outside town. I'd even started dating someone, Eleanor, a retired librarian I'd met at the community center. She was kind, independent, and refreshingly uninterested in what I could do for her. I was having lunch with Eleanor at Miller's Cafe, our usual spot, when I saw her. Scarlett was sitting alone at a corner table, wearing a server's apron and looking exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Eleanor noticed my sudden stillness. "Charles, what's wrong?" "My daughter works here," I said quietly. Eleanor knew the basics of my story. That I'd had a falling out with my family and moved to Cedar Falls for a fresh start. She was wise enough not to pry for details. "Would you like to leave?" she asked gently. I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. "No. I have as much right to be here as anyone else." Scarlett hadn't seen me yet. She was taking an order from an elderly couple, and I could see her forcing a smile, playing the part of the cheerful waitress. But there was something different about her, something I couldn't quite identify at first. Then it hit me. She looked like she was actually working. Not the kind of performative helpfulness she'd shown when Derek's family was around, but genuine, tired, honest work. Her hands moved efficiently as she cleaned tables, refilled coffee cups, and managed the lunch rush with the competence of someone who'd learned to depend on tips for survival. "Charles?" I looked up to find Scarlett standing beside our table, coffee pot in hand. Her face had gone pale, and her hands were trembling slightly. "Hello, Scarlett." Eleanor squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture of support that I appreciated more than I could express. I didn't know you were in town," Scarlett said, her voice carefully controlled. "I live here now." She glanced at Eleanor, clearly trying to piece together the situation. "I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch. Would you like more coffee?" "Please," Eleanor said warmly. "And you must be Scarlett." "I'm Eleanor." Scarlett poured the coffee with hands that had steadied somewhat. "Nice to meet you." The interaction was surreal. Here was my daughter serving me coffee like I was any other customer, both of us pretending this was normal while the weight of everything unsaid hung between us. Could I talk to you for a minute when my shift ends?" Scarlett asked. "It's just another hour." I looked at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. "I suppose." After Scarlett walked away, Eleanor leaned forward. "She seems different than what I expected." "Different how?" "Humbler, sadder, but also, I don't know how to explain it, more real somehow." An hour later, I was sitting alone at the same table while Eleanor ran errands downtown. Scarlett had changed out of her work clothes and into jeans and a faded sweater. She looked nervous as she slid into the seat across from me. "Thank you for staying," she said. I said I would. We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. The cafe had emptied out after the lunch rush, leaving us mostly alone with the soft sounds of dishes being washed in the kitchen. "I've been looking for you," she said finally. "I know. Mrs. Henderson told me you moved. She wouldn't say where, but I figured if I worked enough different places around the area, I'd eventually find you." I studied her face, looking for signs of the old manipulation, the strategic tears and carefully chosen words she'd used to get her way as a teenager. But all I saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. "How long have you been working here?" I asked. 3 months. It's my second job. I work at a bookstore in the mornings." 2 jobs? She nodded, looking down at her hands. "Derek left me with a lot of debt. The deposits for things we'd planned to pay for later, credit cards he'd convinced me to open. I had to move out of the apartment we shared because I couldn't afford the rent." I didn't respond. Part of me, the part that had spent 30 years solving her problems, wanted to ask how much she owed, wanted to help, but I'd learned to recognize that impulse and shut it down. I ended things with him that night. She continued. The night of the wedding. Not just because of what he did to you, but because of who I realized I'd become when I was with him. Who was that? She was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the small downtown street. Someone who thought love could be bought. Someone who measured people by what they could provide instead of who they were. Someone who let the person she loved most be treated like garbage because it was easier than standing up for what was right. The honesty in her voice surprised me. This wasn't the Scarlett I'd raised, the one who'd learned to charm her way out of consequences and deflect responsibility with tears and apologies. I know you're with someone now, she said, glancing toward the door where Eleanor had left. She seems nice. She is. I'm glad. You deserve to be happy. Another silence stretched between us. I found myself studying her face, looking for the spoiled young woman who'd stood by while her fiancé humiliated me. But that person seemed to have been replaced by someone older, wearier, but somehow more substantial. What do you want, Scarlett? She met my eyes for the first time since sitting down. I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not just say the words. I want you to know that I understand what I did to you, and I want you to know that I'm trying to become someone better. And nothing, that's all. I'm not asking you to forgive me or to come back into my life or to help me with my problems. I just needed you to know that I finally understand. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely surprised. Understand what? That you were the only person who ever loved me for who I was instead of what I could give them. That you sacrificed everything for me, and I never even noticed. That when I let Derek treat you like that, I wasn't just hurting you. I was throwing away the most valuable relationship I'll ever have. Her voice broke slightly on the last words, but she didn't cry. She just sat there, waiting for my response. It's too late for apologies, Scarlett. She nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. I know. The father you're apologizing to doesn't exist anymore. The man who would drop everything to fix your problems, who would sacrifice his happiness for yours, I had to let him die to survive. I know that too. We sat in silence for another minute. Around us, the cafe hummed with quiet afternoon activity. I should go, she said finally, standing up from the table. Eleanor's probably waiting for you. As she gathered her purse and jacket, I found myself speaking without really planning to. Scarlett. She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes. The person you're trying to become. Make sure she's someone you can live with. Not someone you think other people want you to be. She nodded, tears finally threatening to spill over. I will. After she left, I sat alone at the table for a long time, feeling something I hadn't expected to feel. Not forgiveness, that was still too far away, if it would ever come at all, but maybe something like closure. The conversation had confirmed what I'd hoped, that the consequence of my actions had forced Scarlett to confront who she really was. And while it was too late to repair what we'd had, maybe it wasn't too late for her to build something better with whatever came next. 2 years later, I was standing in Eleanor's garden, helping her plant tomatoes for the spring, when my phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. Charles, this is Tom, your old landlord. I'm sorry to bother you, but there's a young woman here asking about you. Says she has something that belongs to you. I wiped my hands on a towel, exchanging a look with Eleanor. What's her name? Scarlett. Same one who used to come by before, but she seems different, more settled, I guess. Tell her I'll meet her at Miller's Cafe in an hour. Eleanor raised an eyebrow as I hung up. We'd been together for almost 2 years now, and while she knew about Scarlett, we rarely discussed my past life. Eleanor was remarkable that way. She loved me for who I was in the present, not who I'd been or what baggage I carried. Should I come with you? She asked. No, but thank you. This is something I need to handle alone. An hour later, I walked into Miller's Cafe to find Scarlett sitting at the same corner table where we'd had our conversation 2 years ago. But Tom was right. She looked different, healthier, more confident. Her hair was shorter, styled professionally, and she was wearing a simple but well-fitted dress that suggested she'd managed to improve her financial situation. Hello, Dad. The word hit me like a small electric shock. She hadn't called me Dad since before the wedding. Scarlett. I sat down across from her, noticing the manila envelope she had placed on the table between us. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I know you didn't have to. Tom said you have something that belongs to me. She nodded and pushed the envelope toward me. Open it. Inside were official-looking documents. I recognized them immediately. They were copies of the contracts from her wedding, the ones that had legally bound me to pay for everything. But someone had written, "Paid in full," across each page in red ink, and attached to the front was a certified check for $47,000. I looked up at her, genuinely confused. What is this? It's every penny you spent on my wedding, plus interest calculated at prime rate for the past 2.5 years. I stared at the check, then at her. Scarlett, how did you get this kind of money? I've been working. A lot. The bookstore promoted me to manager after 6 months, and I started doing freelance accounting on weekends. I also sold my car and moved to a smaller apartment. It took 2 years, but I tracked down every expense you paid for and calculated what I owed you. I pushed the envelope back toward her. I don't want this. I know you don't want it, but I needed to pay it. Why? She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the table. Because I finally understood something. When you canceled the wedding, you weren't just punishing me. You were teaching me. You were showing me what it meant to take responsibility for my choices. I studied her face, looking for signs of the old manipulation, but found none. This wasn't the spoiled young woman who'd stood by while Derek humiliated me. This was someone who'd learned to earn what she had. Keep the money, I said. Put it toward your future. She shook her head. I can't move forward carrying this debt to you. It's not about the money, Dad. It's about proving to myself that I can make things right. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the cafe bustled with its usual afternoon crowd, but our corner felt isolated from the world. There's something else, she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small jewelry box and set it on the table. This was Mom's. I recognized it immediately. Sarah's pearl necklace, the one I'd sold to help pay for the wedding. My throat tightened unexpectedly. How did you? I tracked down the pawn shop where you sold it. It took me 8 months to save enough to buy it back. I opened the box with trembling fingers. The pearls lay nestled in faded blue velvet, exactly as I remembered them. Sarah had worn them to our wedding, and later to every important event in our marriage. I know I can never give you back what I cost you, Scarlett said quietly. I know I can't undo the hurt I caused, but I wanted you to have this back. I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I threw away. I closed the jewelry box and looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The person sitting across from me bore little resemblance to the entitled young woman who'd let her fiancé treat me like garbage. This Scarlett had learned to work for what she wanted, to take responsibility for her mistakes, to value things that couldn't be bought. I'm proud of you, I said, and meant it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't break down. Thank you, but that doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. She nodded. I know. I'm not asking for that. I'm just asking if maybe we could start something new, something different, something honest. I thought about the life I'd built in Cedar Falls, the peace I'd found with Eleanor, the friendships I'd made at the animal shelter and woodworking class, the simple pleasure of living for myself instead of constantly trying to fix other people's problems. I'm seeing someone, I said. Eleanor, we're planning to get married next spring. Scarlett smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked genuine. I'm happy for you, really happy. She knows about you, about what happened. If we're going to try to build something new, she'll be part of it. I'd like to meet her properly, when you're ready, when she's ready. I picked up the envelope with the check and the jewelry box. I'll take these, but not because you owe me anything. I'll take them because they represent something important, proof that you've learned to take responsibility for your actions. Thank you. But I want you to understand something, Scarlett. I'm not the father I used to be. I won't drop everything to solve your problems. I won't sacrifice my happiness for yours. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be between equals. That's all I want, she said. A chance to earn your respect instead of just expecting it. As we walked out of the cafe together, I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. The humiliation at the country club that had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning. It had forced both of us to confront who we really were and who we wanted to become. 6 months later, Eleanor and I had a small wedding in the garden behind our house in Cedar Falls. Scarlett was there, sitting in the third row with the friends we'd made in our new community. She didn't try to insert herself into the ceremony or make it about our reconciliation. She simply witnessed our happiness and celebrated it genuinely. During the reception, she approached Eleanor privately to thank her for being patient with our complicated family situation. Later, Eleanor told me, "She's nothing like I expected. She's actually quite lovely." "She's learned to be," I replied. That evening, as Eleanor and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, I reflected on the strange turns life can take. 3 years ago, I'd been a man whose value was measured entirely by what he could provide for others. I'd been financially ruined, emotionally depleted, and convinced that my only worth lay in my ability to solve other people's problems. Now I was married to a woman who loved me for who I was, not what I could give her. I had friendships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. I had a daughter who was finally learning to stand on her own 2 feet instead of depending on others to support her. The peace I felt wasn't the fragile kind that depends on everyone else's happiness. It was the solid, unshakable peace that comes from knowing your own worth and refusing to let others diminish it. Scarlett and I would never have the relationship we once had, the one where I sacrificed everything for her happiness. But we were building something better. A relationship between 2 adults who respected each other's boundaries and independence. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the refusal to enable their worst impulses. Sometimes love means walking away and letting someone face the consequences of their choices. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those consequences teach them to become someone worthy of a second chance. I learned that love without respect is just enabling, and sacrifice without boundaries is just self-destruction. The father who would have done anything for Scarlett's happiness had to die for both of us to find out who we really were, and in the end, that turned out to be the most loving thing I could have done for both of us. Now I'm curious about